My name is Sadie, and I'm 29. 6 months pregnant, I stepped out of my ultrasound room, clutching a blurry photo of my baby boy. My heart was bursting, ready to find my husband Nathan and see his face light up. The hospital hummed around me, sterile and cold, but I felt warm, unstoppable. Then near the elevator, I heard his voice, low and secretive, talking to someone. My best friend Clara. My stomach twisted. What were they hiding? Have you ever felt a moment shift? Everything, I'm curious where you're watching from. Like and subscribe to share this journey with me. I stood frozen behind that vending machine, the hospital's fluorescent lights buzzing above me. Nathan's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it cut through the air like a blade. "We can't tell her yet," he said. Clara's reply was quick, her tone sharp. "Not until we're sure." My hand tightened around the ultrasound photo, its edges digging into my palm. "Sure of what?" My knees felt weak, but I pressed myself closer to the machine, desperate to hear more. The cold metal against my arm grounded me barely. Their words came in fragments, each one a splinter in my chest. Nathan mentioned something about timing about Clara's baby. "It's complicated," he said. Clara laughed a nervous sound and added, "She'd never understand." My breath caught. Me. They were talking about me. The woman carrying his child, the friend who'd planned Clara's baby shower. My mind raced, replaying every moment I'd trusted them. Had I missed something? A loud clatter snapped me out of it. An older woman, maybe a janitor, had dropped her mop nearby. Her name tag read, Lila. She glanced at me, her eyes soft, but piercing, like she could see the storm inside me. I wanted to ask her something, anything, but my throat was dry. She picked up the mop and moved on, leaving me alone with the echo of Nathan's voice. I slid down the wall a bit, my back against the vending machine, trying to piece it together. Clara's voice came again, lower now. "What if she finds out before we're ready?" Nathan sighed, the kind of sigh he used when I asked about his late nights at work. "She won't," he said. "She's too focused on the baby." My heart sank. Was that what he thought of me? Just a distracted pregnant wife, oblivious to whatever they were scheming. The ultrasound photo felt heavy in my hand, a reminder of the joy I'd felt minutes ago now slipping away. I wanted to storm out to demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. My belly felt tighter, the baby's weight pressing against me, grounding me in a way I couldn't explain. I thought of Clara, her warm hugs at our prenatal classes, her texts about cravings and stretch marks. We'd laughed together, planned our nurseries side by side. And Nathan, the man who'd kissed my forehead every night, promising we'd be a family. How could they be hiding something this big? Lila passed by again, her mop swishing against the floor. She didn't look at me this time, but her presence made me feel exposed, like I was caught in a moment I wasn't supposed to see. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and saw a text from my sister Harper from earlier that morning. "Clara's been acting weird. You sure she's okay?" I'd brushed it off, thinking Harper was just being her usual suspicious self. Now her words burned. Had she seen something I hadn't? Nathan and Clara's voices faded, their footsteps echoing down the hall. I peeked out, catching a glimpse of them rounding a corner, their heads still close together. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and anger bubbling up. I wanted to run after them, to scream, but the weight of my pregnancy, the photo in my hand, held me back. What were they planning? And why did it feel like my whole world was about to crack open? I forced myself to stand, my legs shaky, and stumbled toward a bench in the hospital corridor. The ultrasound photo was creased, now my grip too tight. I sat staring at it, the tiny outline of my son blurred by my tears. Nathan and Clara's words looped in my head, each one sharper than the last. I tried to make sense of it, to find some innocent explanation, but my gut screamed otherwise. They were hiding something, and I was the one left in the dark. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Harper. "Call me when you're done. I'm worried." I hadn't told her about Clara's odd behavior lately, how she'd been dodging my questions about her doctor visits. I'd thought it was just pregnancy stress. Now Harper's warning felt like a spotlight on my blindness. I typed a reply, then deleted it. What could I say? That my husband and best friend were plotting behind my back? It sounded absurd, even to me. The hospital was quieter now, the evening shift settling in. A couple passed by the man carrying a bouquet of balloons, the woman beaming. I envied their simplicity, their trust. I remembered Nathan's face when we first saw the positive pregnancy test, how he'd lifted me off the ground laughing. Was that all a lie? I thought of the late nights he'd blamed on work, the way he'd brush off my questions with a quick kiss. I'd believed him every time. I pulled up Harper's text again, rereading it. She'd mentioned Clara's weird vibe at a coffee shop last week, how Clara kept checking her phone, barely listening. I'd laughed it off, saying Clara was just hormonal, but now I saw it differently. The way Clara had started calling Nathan for advice about her pregnancy, how they'd linger after our group dinners. I'd thought it was harmless, even sweet. My stomach churned. How had I been so naive? A memory hit me unbidden. 2 months ago, Nathan had come home late, his shirt wrinkled, claiming he'd been stuck in a meeting. I'd teased him about his tie being loose, and he'd changed the subject, asking about my day. I hadn't pushed, too tired from a long shift at the library where I worked. Now that moment felt like a warning I'd ignored. Had he been with Clara? The thought made my chest ache, like I couldn't get enough air. I stood, needing to move, to do something. The corridor stretched endlessly, the walls too white, too clean. I walked toward the elevator, where I'd heard them, half hoping I'd find some clue, some proof I was wrong. But there was nothing, just a discarded coffee cup on the floor. I leaned against the wall, my hand on my belly, feeling the faint flutter of my son. He was real, my anchor. I couldn't fall apart, not for him. My phone lit up with a call from Nathan. I stared at his name, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to answer, to scream, to demand the truth. But another part, the part that was crumbling, was afraid of what he'd say. I let it go to voicemail, my heart pounding. His message came through a minute later. His voice calm, too calm. "Hey, I'm in the parking lot. Where are you?" No hint of guilt, no sign of the man I'd just heard plotting with Clara. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened Harper's contact and typed, "Can you meet me tonight?" I needed her, even if her bluntness sometimes stung. She'd always been the one to call things as she saw them, while I smoothed things over, always the peacemaker. But peace wasn't an option anymore. I slipped the ultrasound photo into my purse, its edges now frayed. As I headed for the exit, the weight of their secrecy pressed heavier, and I knew this was only the beginning of the truth I'd have to face. Back at our apartment, the silence was deafening. I sat on the couch, the ultrasound photo tucked away in my purse, out of sight, but heavy in my mind. Nathan came home late, his keys jangling as he dropped them on the counter. His smile was forced, like he was trying to erase the hospital corridor from existence. "How'd it go?" he asked, leaning down to kiss my forehead. I pulled back, my skin prickling. His eyes flickered, but he didn't push, just grabbed a beer and sank into his chair. I watched him, my husband, the man I'd built a life with. His phone buzzed on the table screen, lighting up with a text. I glimpsed Clara's name before he flipped it over too quick. "Work," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. My pulse raced, anger curling in my chest. Work. Always work. I wanted to snatch the phone to scream, but I bit my tongue, the taste of restraint bitter. That night, I couldn't sleep. Nathan's snores filled the bedroom, steady, oblivious. I stared at the ceiling, my hand on my belly, feeling the baby shift. My son deserved better than lies. Around 2 a.m, I slipped out of bed, bare feet cold on the hardwood. Nathan's phone was on the nightstand, its glow taunting me. I hesitated, heart pounding, then grabbed it. His passcode was our anniversary. It unlocked with a soft click. There it was, a thread with Clara. My hands shook as I scrolled. Her latest message sent hours ago. "We need to decide soon." Nathan's reply. "I know. It's not easy." My throat tightened, the words blurring. "Decide what?" I scrolled up, finding snippets of plans vague but damning. "After the babies are born," Clara had written last week. "We'll figure it out then." Nathan hadn't argued, just sent a thumbs up. My stomach churned, bile rising. They were planning a future one that didn't include me. I set the phone down, my breath shallow. The nursery door was cracked open, moonlight spilling onto the half-finished crib. I walked in my fingers, brushing the broken baby rattle I'd meant to fix. It was a gift from my mom, something she'd saved from my childhood. I picked it up, the pieces clinking in my hand. I sat on the floor, trying to fit them together, my hands trembling. Each snap felt like defiance, like I could piece myself back together too. By morning, Nathan was up early, humming as he made coffee. His normalcy infuriated me. I wanted to confront him to shatter his calm, but Harper's voice echoed in my head, calling me naive. I needed proof, something undeniable. I decided to see Clara, to look her in the eye and gauge her lies. I drove to her house, the ultrasound photo still in my purse, a silent reminder of what was at stake. Her street was quiet, but Nathan's car was parked 2 houses down. My heart stopped. He was here. I pulled over, my hands gripping the wheel. Through Clara's window, I saw them standing close, their voices muffled but urgent. Clara's hand rested on her belly, mirroring mine, and Nathan nodded, his face serious. My vision blurred with tears, anger surging. They were building something without me, something that threatened everything I'd dreamed of. I wanted to barge in to demand answers, but fear held me back. What if the truth was worse than I imagined? I sat in my car, the engine idling, my hands still clamped on the steering wheel. Clara's house glowed with morning light, but inside, Nathan and Clara stood like conspirators, their silhouettes sharp against the curtains. I couldn't hear their words, but their closeness was a knife twisting in my gut. My breath fogged the window, each exhale a shaky reminder of how alone I felt. I wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, but the evidence was piling up, crushing my hope. I drove home, the streets blurring past my mind, stuck on Nathan's car parked so casually near Clara's. At our apartment, I found Harper waiting, her arms crossed, eyes narrowing as I walked in. "You look like hell," she said, blunt as always. I collapsed onto the couch, my purse spilling open, the ultrasound photo sliding out. Harper picked it up, her face softening for a moment before hardening again. "What's going on, Sadie talk?" I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. How could I explain the betrayal I wasn't even sure I understood? Instead, I told her about seeing Nathan at Clara's, the text messages, their secretive murmurs. Harper's jaw tightened. "He's cheating," she said, her voice flat, "and Clara's in on it. You're too trusting." Her words stung, echoing my own fears. I wanted to argue to defend Nathan, but the image of him with Clara choked me. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. Harper paced, her boots thudding on the floor. "Confront him, now, or I will." Her protectiveness was fierce, but it made me feel small, like I'd failed to see the truth everyone else had. I shook my head, my hands cradling my belly. "I need time," I said, but Harper scoffed. "Time for what? For them to hurt you more." Her judgment burned, widening the gap between us. I loved her, but her certainty made my doubt feel like weakness. Later, I went to a prenatal class, hoping routine would steady me. Clara was there, her smile bright, too bright. She hugged me, her perfume sharp, and chatted about baby names as if nothing was wrong. I nodded my responses mechanical, my eyes searching her face for cracks. She avoided my gaze, focusing on the instructor, her hand resting on her belly like a shield. I felt invisible, a ghost in her presence, my trust in our friendship crumbling. After class, I lingered watching Clara pack her bag with quick, nervous movements. I wanted to ask her outright to demand why she was meeting Nathan, but my voice failed me. Instead, I drove to the library where I worked seeking solace in the quiet stacks. There, I found a photo on my desk, one I hadn't seen in months. It was from a work event Nathan had attended, one I'd skipped because of morning sickness. He and Clara were in the background laughing, their shoulders touching. My heart sank. It wasn't proof, but it was close enough. That night, I lay awake, Nathan's side of the bed empty. He'd texted about a late meeting, but I didn't believe him anymore. The nursery loomed across the hall, the broken rattle still unfixed, a symbol of my unraveling life. My anger grew laced with sorrow as I pictured Clara and Nathan planning without me. Were they laughing at my trust? My pregnancy felt heavier, my son's future uncertain. I clutched my pillow, tears soaking the fabric, knowing I couldn't stay silent much longer, but terrified of what the truth would cost. The baby shower at Clara's house was a pastel blur, balloons bobbing against the ceiling, laughter bouncing off the walls. I stood in the corner, my hands clasped over my belly, forcing a smile as guests cooed over tiny socks and onesies. Clara flitted around, her laughter bright, her pregnancy glow almost mocking. Nathan was by the gift table chatting with Miles, Clara's husband, his ease a stark contrast to the knot in my chest. I felt like an outsider in a room full of my own life. I sipped lemonade, the sweetness cloying, and scanned the crowd. Tessa, a friend from college, caught my eye and waved her smile hesitant. I nodded back, but my focus drifted to Nathan. He'd been distant all week, his texts short, his excuses flimsy. I'd come to the shower hoping for a moment of normalcy, but every glance between him and Clara felt like a coded message I couldn't crack. Then I saw them slip into the kitchen, Nathan's hand brushing Clara's elbow as they passed through the doorway. My pulse quickened. I set my glass down, the clink lost in the chatter, and moved toward the kitchen, weaving through guests. My heart pounded, each step heavier, my belly a constant reminder of what was at stake. I stopped just outside, hidden by the half-open door, their voices low but clear. "We need to move fast," Nathan said, his tone urgent. "She's not ready for this." Clara's voice was softer, almost pleading. "But what if she fights back? She's stronger than you think." My breath caught my hands trembling. They were talking about me, about taking something away. Nathan's reply was a gut punch. "She won't. She's too fragile right now. We'll take the kids and go." Kids? My son, Clara's baby, together. I pressed a hand to my mouth, stifling a gasp. The room spun, the pastel decorations blurring into a sickly haze. Clara's voice came again, cold and certain. "She'll break, Nathan. She can't handle it alone." My knees buckled, and I leaned against the wall, the plaster cool against my palm. They were planning to leave, to rip my family apart, to take my son and raise him with Clara's child, as if I was nothing. A loud pop shattered the moment, a balloon bursting somewhere in the living room. Laughter erupted from the guests, but it felt distant, like I was underwater. My eyes burned, tears threatening, but I couldn't move. The kitchen door creaked, and I shrank back, my heart racing. Nathan's words echoed, "Fragile, break alone." I'd trusted him, loved him, built a nursery for our son, and he saw me as weak, disposable. Tessa appeared beside me, her hand on my arm. "Sadie, you okay? You're pale." Her concern was genuine, but it felt like a spotlight on my shame. I shook my head, my voice trapped. She frowned, glancing toward the kitchen. "What's going on?" she whispered. I couldn't answer. The truth was too raw, too impossible. Nathan and Clara wanted to erase me to steal my future, and I was standing in their way, pregnant and powerless, my world cracking under the weight of their betrayal. I pulled away from Tessa, my throat tight, and stumbled toward the back door, needing air. The kitchen voices faded, but Nathan's words clung to me sharp and unyielding. I stepped into Clara's backyard. The late afternoon sun harshed the grass uneven under my feet. A picnic table sat under an oak tree scattered with paper plates from the shower. I sank onto the bench, my hands shaking, my belly heavy. The world felt too small, like it was closing in, trapping me in their plan. Inside, the party hummed on, oblivious. I saw Miles through the window, laughing with a guest, his arm around a stack of gifts. He had no idea his wife was plotting with my husband, no clue their lives were tangled in this betrayal. The irony burned a cruel twist that made my isolation sharper. I wanted to scream to shatter their perfect facade, but my voice was gone, stolen by the weight of what I'd heard. Footsteps crunched behind me. Clara stood there, her silhouette framed by the house's glow, her expression unreadable. "Sadie, you're missing the games," she said, her voice too light, like she hadn't just been scheming to take my son. I stared at her, searching for the friend I'd known, the one who'd cried with me over coffee, who'd promised we'd raise our kids together. She shifted her hand on her belly, and I saw it, a flicker of guilt quickly masked. Nathan appeared beside her, his eyes darting to me then away. "Everything okay?" he asked. His tone practiced the same one he used when he lied about late nights. My chest ached, a raw, hollow pain. They stood together, a united front, their ease a silent mockery of my trust. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Instead, I saw our wedding day, Nathan's hand in mine, promising forever. Now he was choosing Clara, choosing a life that erased me. Clara stepped closer, her smile faltering. "You look tired," she said, her voice laced with something I couldn't name. Pity control. "Maybe you should rest." Her words were a slap, a reminder of their kitchen talk, calling me fragile, breakable. Nathan nodded his hand, brushing Clara's arm, a gesture so casual it tore through me. They didn't just want to leave. They wanted to rewrite my story, to paint me as the weak one who couldn't cope. I stood, my legs unsteady, my hands clenched. The backyard spun, the oak tree's branches blurring into shadows. Miles' laughter echoed from inside, a cruel soundtrack to my unraveling. Tessa's voice called from the house, asking where I'd gone, but it felt distant, unreachable. Nathan and Clara watched me, their faces a mix of concern and calculation, like they were measuring how much I could take before I broke. My son kicked inside me, a faint pulse of life, but even that couldn't anchor me now. I was falling, drowning in their betrayal, with no way out. I left Clara's backyard, my steps unsteady, the baby shower's chatter fading behind me. My hands shook as I drove home. Nathan and Clara's words looping in my mind. Their plan to take my son, a wound that wouldn't close. Our apartment was dark when I got there, the nursery's half-finished crib, a silent accusation. I sank onto the couch, my belly heavy, my heart heavier. But something shifted inside me, a spark of defiance. I couldn't let them erase me. Not for my son. I stayed up all night, the clock ticking past midnight. My phone sat silent, no texts from Nathan, no apologies. I didn't expect any. Instead, I pulled out a notebook, my hands steady for the first time in days, and started writing. Questions, fears, truths I'd avoided. What did Nathan want? Why Clara? What was I worth? The words poured out raw and unfiltered, each one a step toward clarity. I wasn't fragile. I was his mother. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. Nathan would be home soon, his routine predictable despite his lies. I showered the hot water, washing away the fog of despair, and dressed carefully, choosing a sweater that made me feel solid grounded. I set the notebook on the kitchen table open to my questions and placed the ultrasound photo beside it. It wasn't an accusation. It was a line in the sand. I deserved answers, and I'd get them. Nathan walked in at 7, his tie loose, his face tired but guarded. He saw the notebook, the photo, and froze. "Sadie, what's this?" he asked, his voice low, like he was testing the water. I stood by the counter, my hands clasped to hide their tremble, and looked him in the eye. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, surprising even me. "No more excuses. I heard you at the hospital. With Clara." His face paled, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "It's not what you think he started, but I cut him off." "Then tell me what it is. Tell me why you're planning a life with her, why you think I can't handle our son." My words were sharp, each one a release of the pain I'd carried. Nathan's eyes widened, caught, but he stammered. "I was helping her, Sadie. She's scared, and Stop," I said, my voice rising, but not breaking. "You don't get to lie anymore. I deserve the truth." He looked at the ultrasound photo, then at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not guilt, not love, but fear of being exposed. It hurt, but it fueled me. I wasn't the weak one here. I stepped closer, my hand on my belly, feeling my son's faint kick. "If you can't be honest, you need to leave. Now." Nathan didn't move, his silence louder than any confession. I turned away, my heart racing, but resolute, and grabbed my phone. Harper's number was first in my contacts. I texted her. I confronted him. "Can you come over?" Her reply was instant. "On my way." I set the phone down, my breath steadying. This was just the beginning, but I felt it, a strength I hadn't known I had, rising like a tide ready to carry me forward. Harper arrived within the hour, her knock sharp against the quiet of the apartment. Nathan was still in the kitchen, his hands gripping the edge of the table, the notebook untouched between us. I opened the door and Harper's eyes scanned me, then him, her jaw tight. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low but fierce. I nodded, feeling the weight of her support, a lifeline I hadn't realized I needed. "Stay," I said, and she took a seat, her presence a quiet challenge to Nathan's silence. I turned back to him, my resolve hardening. "If you won't talk, I'll find out myself," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. His eyes flickered a mix of guilt and defiance, but he stayed quiet. I grabbed my purse, pulling out the keys to Clara's house. She'd given me a spare last year, a gesture of trust now turned sour. "I'm going to her," I said. "She'll tell me what you won't." Nathan stood his chair, scraping the floor. "Sadie, don't," he said, his voice cracking. "You're blowing this out of proportion." But his words were hollow, and I saw it, the way his hands twitched, the way he avoided my gaze. I shook my head, done with his half-truths. Harper stood too, her hand on my shoulder. "I'm driving," she said, and I didn't argue. Her strength bolstered mine, a reminder I wasn't alone. At Clara's house, the lights were on her car in the driveway. My heart pounded as I knocked the spare key cold in my pocket. Clara opened the door, her face paling when she saw me. "Sadie," she said, her voice too high, her hand clutching the door frame. "What's wrong?" I stepped inside, Harper behind me, and the air felt thick, charged. "You tell me," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "What's the plan, Clara? What are you and Nathan hiding?" She faltered, her gaze darting to the living room where a stack of moving boxes sat against the wall. My stomach dropped, the sight confirming my worst fears. "It's not what you think," she started, but her voice broke, tears welling up. I didn't flinch. "Then explain," I said, my tone steady, each word a demand. "You're my best friend. You owe me that." Clara's tears fell, but she didn't answer, her silence louder than any confession. I felt a surge of power, not anger, but clarity. I was done being the one left in the dark. Harper stepped forward, her voice low. "She's not leaving until you talk." Clara's shoulders slumped, and she sank onto the couch, her hands covering her face. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered, but I cut her off. "You planned to take my son, to leave me behind. That's not an accident." My words hung in the air, heavy, final. Clara sobbed, but I felt no pity, only a fierce determination to protect my future. The next morning, I met Karen, a lawyer I'd found through a coworker. Her office was small, cluttered with files, but her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp. I told her everything, my voice steady as I recounted the hospital, the texts, the shower. She listened, jotting notes, then leaned forward. "You're stronger than you know," she said. "We'll make sure your son is safe." Her words sank in a quiet validation. I nodded, signing the papers she slid across the desk, each stroke of the pen a reclaiming of my life. Back home, I stood in the nursery, the crib now assembled, the rattle fixed and resting on a shelf. Harper had stayed over, her snores soft from the couch. I ran my fingers over the crib's smooth wood, feeling my son's gentle kick inside me. The room was quiet, the morning light soft through the window. I didn't need Nathan's truth anymore. I had my own. I closed my eyes, my hand on my belly, and let that strength settle, a silent vow to never let anyone take my power again. Nathan packed his things that evening, his movements slow, deliberate, like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. I stood by the nursery door, arms crossed, watching him fold shirts into a duffel bag. His eyes flicked to me, once searching, but I held steady, my face a mask of resolve. "I'll call you," he said, his voice flat, and walked out. The door clicked shut, and the apartment fell silent, the air heavy with his absence. I exhaled a shaky release, but didn't cry. The next morning, a small box of cookies sat outside my door, a note tucked under the ribbon. "For you and the little one. Joyce." My neighbor, the older woman from down the hall, had left them. I hadn't told her anything, but her gesture felt like a quiet acknowledgement, a thread of kindness in the chaos. I brought the cookies inside, their buttery scent filling the kitchen, and ate one, the sweetness grounding me. I called Karen to confirm our next steps. Her voice was crisp, professional, outlining custody options and financial protections. "Nathan's agreed to mediation," she said. "He's not fighting you, not yet." I nodded, though she couldn't see my fingers tracing the edge of the cookie box. His compliance surprised me, but it wasn't relief I felt, just a hollow space where trust used to be. I thanked her and hung up, staring at the nursery, its walls still bare, waiting for my touch. Harper came over, her energy softer now, less jagged. She brought takeout and we ate on the couch, the TV humming in the background. "You did good," she said, her fork pausing midair, kicking him out, facing Clara. "I'm proud." Her words warmed me, but they couldn't fill the ache. I told her about Nathan's silence, Clara's tears, and she listened, her usual sharpness replaced by a quiet nod. For the first time, I felt like she saw me, not just the sister who needed saving. A letter arrived from Clara later that week, her handwriting neat on the envelope. I hesitated, then opened it, my hands steady. "I'm sorry," it began, her words careful, polished. She wrote about fear, about mistakes, but never mentioned the plan, never named my son. It was an apology that dodged accountability, and it left me cold. I folded it, tucked it into a drawer, and closed it with a soft thud. Her absence was louder than her words, a confirmation she'd chosen distance over truth. I went to the hardware store that afternoon, picking out paint for the nursery. The clerk, a young guy named Lucas, helped me choose a soft blue, his chatter about his own kid easing the weight in my chest. I carried the can home, its heft a promise of something new. As I set it in the nursery, I felt my son shift a gentle nudge, and I rested my hand on my belly. Nathan's exit, Clara's letter, Joyce's cookies, they were pieces of a life I was rebuilding, but the edges were still sharp, the picture incomplete. The paint can sat in the nursery, unopened, its promise of renewal untouched. I spent the next days navigating doctor appointments alone, the waiting rooms sterile and quiet. Each ultrasound, each heartbeat on the monitor was a reminder of my son, my reason to keep moving. But the solitude stung a constant echo of Nathan's absence, Clara's retreat. At home, I avoided the mailbox, afraid of another hollow letter, another reminder of their betrayal. The apartment felt too big, its corners too empty. Joyce knocked one afternoon, her smile tentative, a small jar of soup in her hands. "Thought you could use this," she said, stepping inside. Her eyes scanned the bare nursery walls, and she sat with me on the couch, her presence steady. "My husband left me years ago," she said, her voice soft. "Took everything but my will to start over." Her story wasn't mine, but it settled in me a quiet strength, a mirror of survival. Nathan texted late one night, his message brief. "Can we talk? I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering the urge to respond, warring with the need to protect myself. I typed, "Not yet," and hit send, my heart racing. His reply didn't come, and the silence was both a victory and a wound. I wanted him to fight for us, to prove I'd misread everything, but his quiet confirmed my fears. He was letting go, and I was left to carry the pieces. At a mediation session with Karen, Nathan sat across from me. His tie crooked, his eyes fixed on the table. Karen outlined terms, her voice steady, but I watched him searching for the man I'd married. He admitted to supporting Clara, claiming it was about her fears as a single mother. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice low, but he didn't look at me. His words were a half-truth, a shield, and they left me colder than Clara's letter. I walked to the park after the air-crisp leaves crunching underfoot. Joyce was there, sitting on a bench, her scarf bright against the gray sky. She waved me over, and we sat, the wind sharp on my face. "You're doing the hard thing," she said, her eyes kind but firm. "That's enough for now." I nodded, but my chest ached, the weight of single motherhood looming. I wanted to believe her, but the path ahead felt endless. Back home, I opened the nursery closet, pulling out a small blanket I'd bought weeks ago, its fabric soft, untouched. I folded it, my hands slow, deliberate, and placed it in the crib. The room was still, the paint can a silent challenge. My son's heartbeat echoed in my memory, strong, steady, but I felt fragile, not from weakness, but from the cost of standing firm. I sat on the floor, the blanket's edge brushing my fingers, and let the quiet swallow me, the future, both certain and impossibly far. The nursery was finally taking shape, its walls now a soft blue, the paint can empty in the corner. I stood on a stepladder, brushing careful strokes of white to form a constellation of stars above the crib. The brush felt light in my hand, each star a small act of creation, a claim on the future. My son's kicks were stronger now, a steady rhythm that kept me grounded. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't press, but held space for me to breathe. Harper came by that afternoon, her arms full of baby clothes neatly folded in a basket. She set them on the floor, her smile softer than I'd seen in months. "You're making a home here," she said, her eyes tracing the stars. I nodded, stepping down from the ladder, my hands dusted with paint. We sorted the clothes together, tiny socks and onesies piling up, and for the first time, I felt the weight of her belief in me, not just her worry. We talked as we worked, not about Nathan or Clara, but about simpler things. Her new job, my plans for the library after maternity leave. It was easy, like slipping into an old rhythm, but stronger rebuilt. "I was hard on you," she said suddenly, her hands pausing over a striped romper. "I thought I was helping, but I pushed too much." Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a question, a need for forgiveness. I reached for her hand, squeezing it. "You were here," I said. "That's enough." The moment lingered, a bridge mended. I thought of our childhood, how Harper always led fierce and certain while I followed smoothing edges. Now I was leading not with her fire, but with a quiet I'd earned. The stars above the crib caught the light, their edges imperfect but deliberate. They weren't just for my son. They were for me, a map of where I'd been, where I was going. I didn't need Nathan's promises or Clara's friendship to find my way. Later, I sat alone in the nursery, glowing in the dusk. I opened a drawer, pulling out a small journal I'd started weeks ago. Not the one with angry questions, but a new one filled with hopes. I wrote about my son, the library, the life I'd build. Each word was a choice, a refusal to let betrayal define me. My hand rested on my belly, his movements a quiet conversation, and I felt a peace I hadn't known I could claim, steady and unyielding. I left the nursery and walked to the kitchen, the journal still in my hand. The counter held a small wooden box, a keepsake from my grandmother, its lid carved with faint vines. I opened it, the hinges creaking, and placed the journal inside next to a faded photo of my parents. It wasn't closure, not exactly, but a choice to hold my hopes close, safe from the past. The act felt final, a quiet step towards something new, something mine. Tessa called later, her voice hesitant. "Can we meet?" she asked. I agreed, curious but calm, and we sat at a corner coffee shop, the air thick with roasted beans. She fidgeted her mug untouched, then looked at me. "I should have seen you were hurting," she said, her eyes wet. "I'm sorry." I watched her, the friend who'd once known my every secret, and felt no anger, only distance. "It's okay," I said, meaning it. "We're different now." Her nod was small, accepting, and we parted with a hug lighter than before. Back home, I visited Joyce, her apartment warm with the scent of cinnamon. She handed me a handmade baby blanket, its stitches tight, deliberate. "For your boy?" she said, her smile crinkling her eyes. We talked over tea, her stories of resilience weaving into mine, not as lessons, but as echoes. I left with the blanket folded in my arms, its weight a comfort, a reminder of roots I hadn't known I'd find. At my last prenatal class, I sat among other mothers, their chatter soft, hopeful. I didn't feel alone anymore, not the way I had weeks ago. My hands rested on my belly, my son's movements steady, a promise of tomorrow. Karen called that evening, her voice brisk. "Nathan's agreed to co-parent, no contest," she said. I thanked her, the news settling without fanfare. It was enough for now. In the nursery, I hung a small mobile above the crib, its wooden stars swaying gently. I stood back the room, complete, its blue walls soft in the lamplight. My son kicked a quiet hello, and I smiled, my heart still. The past was there, its scars faint but real, but it no longer led me. I sat in the rocking chair, the blanket across my lap, and let the silence hold me steady, whole, ready for what came next. The hospital room was bright, the monitors beeping softly as I held my son Miles for the first time. His tiny fingers curled around mine, his breath warm against my chest. Harper stood by the bed, her eyes soft, a rare smile breaking through her usual edge. "He's perfect," she whispered, brushing his cheek. I nodded, too full to speak, the weight of labor fading under the love that flooded me. Miles was here, real mine, and nothing could take that away. Those first days, blurred, sleepless, but vivid. Back home, The nursery welcomed us, its blue walls a quiet haven. I rocked Miles in the chair, his small noises filling the silence, each one a tether to the present. The apartment felt different now, not empty, but open, like it was waiting for us to grow into it. I started a routine, simple but steady feeding naps, walks to the park with the stroller, the rhythm grounding me. One morning, I found a new coffee mug on the counter, a gift from Harper, its handle sturdy, its color, a deep green. I brewed a pot, the steam curling in the sunlight, and sat by the window, Miles asleep in his bassinet. The mug warmed my hands, its weight a small comfort. I thought of Nathan now, a distant figure, his visits scheduled, his presence minimal. Clara hadn't reached out, her silence a closed door. I didn't mind. My world was smaller now, but it was mine. Joyce stopped by with the basket of muffins, her laughter easy as she cooed over Miles. "You're doing it," she said, her eyes crinkling. "One day at a time." I smiled, offering her a muffin, and we talked about ordinary things, weather recipes, the kind of talk that stitches life together. Her visits became a habit, a thread of connection I hadn't expected, each one a reminder that I wasn't alone. Not really. At night, after Miles slept, I'd sit with a book, the pages a quiet escape. The library had granted me extended leave, but I missed its calm, the rustle of pages, the kids whispering in the story corner. I started planning my return, small steps, part-time at first. The thought didn't scare me, not like it might have before. Miles had changed me, but so had I, choosing myself, choosing him every day. I walked to the park one afternoon, the stroller's wheels humming on the path. The air was cool, the trees bare their branches sharp against the sky. I stopped by a bench, watching other mothers, their laughter mingling with the wind. Miles stirred his eyes, blinking open, and I leaned down, kissing his forehead. The past was there, its echoes faint, but it didn't pull me back. I was here now, whole in a way I hadn't known I could be. Months passed, and Miles grew, his giggles filling the apartment, his tiny hands reaching for the stars above his crib. I found a new rhythm, one I built myself. Mornings were for coffee in the green mug, afternoons for reading to Miles, his eyes wide at the sound of my voice. I started back at the library part-time, the familiar scent of books, a quiet homecoming. My co-workers welcomed me, their smiles warm, no questions about Nathan, just stories of their own kids, their own lives. One evening, I sat in the nursery, Miles asleep, the room lit by a small lamp. I pulled out a frame I'd bought, simple wood, nothing fancy, and slipped in a photo of Miles's first smile. His face scrunched and joyful. I hung it on the wall, stepping back to look. The nursery wasn't just a room anymore. It was a story, ours built from choices I'd made, from pain I'd walked through. I didn't feel strong, not in the loud way people talk about, but steady, like a tree that bends, but holds. I thought about Nathan, his brief visits, his awkward attempts to connect. I didn't hate him, not anymore. He was part of Miles, part of this story, but not its center. Clara's name rarely crossed my mind. Her absence, a relief, not a wound. I'd learned something not from their betrayal, but from the quiet after. My worth wasn't tied to their choices or anyone's. It was in the way I showed up for Miles, for myself every day, even when it hurt. I started a new habit, writing letters to Miles, not to give him now, but for later. In them, I told him about courage, about love that doesn't demand perfection, about the woman I was becoming. Each letter was a promise not to be flawless, but to be present. I tucked them in the wooden box with my grandmother's photo, a small legacy, a map of who we were. It wasn't about erasing the past, but carrying it lightly, letting it teach without ruling. The biggest lesson wasn't loud or grand. It was simple, carved from the ache of those months. I learned to trust myself, not just others. To know my own edges, my own strength, even when the world tried to tell me I was less. That trust, that quiet knowing, was what carried me through, what let me sit here in this nursery, with my son's breath soft in the air, and feel enough. What's a moment that taught you who you are? I'd love to hear your story in the comments to know what shaped you. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to healing, to finding our way one step at a time.